going to be talking about careers in product management. So before we start, a quick introduction about myself. So yeah, I'm a product manager with Google AI and Google Brain. I've been a PM with these teams for about close to 3 years now. And as my focus area, I'm sort of think of me as a research and development PM. So how do we take some of these like most cutting edge technologies that are being developed at the Google AI research and bringing them to Google products? So some of the things you may have heard about are around conversational chatbots, understanding sentiment and emotion from textual content, compressing things like smart reply, which are like the small chips that you see at the bottom of the messaging apps for easy responding of messages. So yeah, those are some of the things that I'm working on, and super excited to be here. Cool. So quick update on what I'm going to be talking about today. So just high level two things. What exactly is the job of a product manager? And if somebody is interested in getting into product management, what are sort of some of the tips I can offer in that front? Cool. So let's jump into the first one. What exactly is the job of a PM? I think this part is one of the most unclear parts in the industry, and rightly so, because there is not like one type of PM. For example, like you can be a backend developer, you can be good in Java and some of the related technologies, but for PMs, the skill set is not that tangible. So let's talk about some of the common things that are common across different companies for the product manager role, and then we can dive deeper into some of the case studies. All right. So the first key responsibility of a product manager within any team or within any organization is to figure out what game are we playing, what game should we be playing. And by game here, I mean what kind of things should we be focusing on, what kind of products we should be building. So in like simple terms, saying that defining the product strategy. So you see a cute little guy on the right with a guitar. So I'm just going to use an example. If you want to build an, I like learning guitar. So I'm just using this analogy for obvious reasons. I cannot share a lot about the stuff that I'm doing at Google. So I just decided to use an analogy and an example for how to think about this. So think about a case where you are in a company and you have to build an app for guitar learners. So the user base is guitar learners. Now, there are a lot of questions that come into picture as you are thinking about building an app for guitar learners. One is like, what kind of solution should we be building? So should it be like a peer-to-peer network of like guitar tutors and people who want to learn? So it could be like a Uber for guitar, which is connecting which is kind of a gig economy. The second option could be you can just create a collection of guitar chords. So think about it as Wikipedia. So you are not basically helping people connect to like tutors. Rather, you're just providing a list of guitar chords. The third potential option could be you actually are creating a tutor app where the users can actually play the guitar along with some of the things that are shown on the screen and kind of learn by doing. So think about a karaoke style guitar learning app where as you're playing, you can actually see the notes moving with you, and then it identifies when you have made a mistake and then gives you back, right? So all three of these are the right kind of are potential solutions that you could be building for a guitar learner. Which way should we be going? And that is the job of a product manager, to figure out how to like evaluate what solution to build. On similar lines, they have to identify for the product, like what is the goal, like why we are building this, and what is the overall goal for the company. Does the company want to increase users? Does the company want to earn more revenues with this particular app, or this is like just a side project that they are testing it out? So based on these, a lot of answers to the product changes. The other things are around like what game we should be playing is just understanding the user pain point. So based on the user pain points, the product manager basically figures out, oh, we should actually be building this and not this. And then the last is like, what is the overall industry and the trend in this area? So the PMs basically go out, figure out like, hey, in the music learning industry, these are kind of the trends that are going on. We shouldn't be targeting X and Y because it is a crowded space and it is not solving the user problem. Versus this sounds like more interesting. So just to recap, the first and one of the most important responsibilities of the PM is to figure out what game the team should be playing, aka what is the strategy for the product. The second high level responsibility that a PM has is around prioritization of efforts. While this may seem like very intuitive or easy, like, hey, yeah, we just have, like, we have the list of features and we just have to prioritize, this is one of the most difficult things. So continuing with the example of the guitar playing, uh, let's say that as a PM you have decided that we want to build a tutoring app for guitar. So guitar tutoring app, the karaoke for guitar that I was talking about earlier, right? So with respect to that, the PM goes out and figures out like what are the kind of features that we should be building. So it could be library of chords, lessons with progressive difficulty, record actually what the user is actually playing on their guitars, and maybe like pick up mistakes using an ML model. So an ML model is always listening to what you're playing. And then based on what you're playing, it can identify whether the chord is right or wrong, and then nudge you that, hey, like this doesn't seem right, you should play it like this, right? So once there is a list of these features, and there could be like a lot many of these like interesting features that come out, the PMs essentially figure out what the prioritization of these should be. Which of these should be built in phase one, which is kind of a minimum viable product phase? Which of them should be in phase two? So here I add a ML model here because this is a good to have feature, but it is not the core product in itself somehow. So this should kind of go in phase two. And similarly, they do it for 25 other for other features. But one of the hardest things to do as a product manager is figuring out which features we should not be building. And at the end of the day, it comes down to like resourcing, and engineering resources are limited. So prioritization is usually a balancing act between what the users are requesting, what the business needs are, and what is good for the product in the short and the long term. So you have to manage the short term versus long term. Because if as a PM you're working only on short term things, you will not kind of hit the long term goals of the project. And if you're not working on, if you're only working on the long term things, then kind of short term takes a hit and your user base may not grow. So uh, I love this quote, like if everything is a focus, nothing is a focus. And it is the responsibility of the PM to define what the focus of the team should be through ruthless prioritization. So this was second, prioritization of efforts. And the third high level responsibility is around execution. So at the end of the day, the job of a product manager is to ship products. And they need to do whatever it takes, and they essentially do whatever it takes to ship the product. So some examples of that is having clear specifications doc on what needs to be built and why we should be building that. Analyzing user data. So if you don't have a data analyst or a data scientist in your team, you as a PM would be responsible for crunching the data and doing all sorts of things. So for example, if you look at the data and figure out, hey, like some of these lessons are being played a lot. So based on that, you can take a call that, hey, like I should add this as a featured lesson on the homepage of my app or something like that. So like good product managers usually go and see the data almost every day and figure out what the user trends are. As a PM, you're also the quality analyst of the product. Like if you do not have a dedicated QA, you have to be the dedicated QA. If you don't like to play guitar, or if you don't play guitar, I'm afraid you have to kind of play your own game. You have to learn to play guitar and test your product every day. One more is the PM works a lot with cross-functional teams and fill in for cross-functional needs. So in a startup, if there may not be a marketing campaign manager or a sales guy or a UX guy or a partnerships guy, it is essentially the responsibility of a PM to essentially fill in all these gaps. So for this slide, in a nutshell, the idea is that the PMs do whatever it takes to ship strong products. So these were the three things, as I said: figure out the product strategy, think about the prioritization, and then drive the execution. I think at a high level, these are sort of the three most important responsibilities that a PM has in any given organization. So let's jump into a little bit about, if you want to get into product management, how would you essentially do it? But before that, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, especially from engineers, like, hey, should I get into product management? Should I be a product manager? So I usually say it depends. And let's talk about what I mean by that. So there are obviously positives and challenges of every field, including PM. Let's start with what are sort of the positives and what kind of things you get out of being a PM. And then we can jump into some of the challenges. So the first one is, and I really love this one, is solving a real world problem. So not to say that software engineers or other roles do not do that. I think they also do that, but I think the product management role, the product manager role, is at the front and center of identifying the problems. So day in and day out, as a PM, you will go out, talk to users, understand what the pain points are, and try to come up with solutions. And I think the PM role is much closer than any other role in a standard organization with respect to these. So this is wonderful. If like new challenges excite you, I think this is a wonderful positive. The other one is breadth versus depth. So as a PM, your breadth would be really high, but your depth on, let's say, some of the tangible things would be low. So you get to work with like industry experts, you get to work with cross-functional teams like legal, sales, marketing, and so on. So the amount of information you get from these different fields is super high compared to other specialized role. For example, in software engineering, you would primarily be focused on like driving some of the execution aspects on the features. And I think one last thing is around leadership training. So the product managers essentially define the what we should be building and why we should be building in a development cycle. Which essentially means what should be the focus of the team and what should be the strategy of the overall team. So this is kind of, in a way, some of the key things that leaders do, the executives at a company do. So this is actually a good training ground for leadership. Again, not to say that software engineers do not get this training. I'm pretty sure like software engineers get this too. It's just that with the exposure and being at the front and the center of the problem, I think the PMs get slightly more than some of the other roles. Let's come to the challenges. So I guess one of the biggest challenges that PMs face is they don't really have tangible skills that they can call out. So for example, product sense, which is essentially what product we should be building, what feature we should be building, is an important PM skill. But you can't really like put that on a resume, or it's hard to basically justify that on the resume, versus as a developer, you can clearly say, hey, yeah, I know Java. I've like built this complicated infrastructure stack. The second challenge in a PM role or as a PM is leading without authority. So PMs almost never have direct authority over the software engineers, and by authority I mean like management chain. So you, as a PM, you are kind of always dependent on another team, which is kind of has to build the product. And if you are not able to influence them, then the thing doesn't essentially gets built. So influence is a very important skill set in a PM world, and it can be frustrating sometimes that you are clear on what needs to be built, but the engineering team or the tech lead doesn't agree with it, and because of that, things are being stalled. And the last is, PMs are busier than like most of the other roles in some sense. So meetings are a way of life. You have to like ruthlessly prioritize your time and figure out how can you like take out a few hours a day to essentially get work done. And lastly, I think this is very well said. I read this quote somewhere that if a product succeeds, it's because of the team, because everybody did what they are supposed to do. But if it fails, it's because of a PM. Because as a PM, you are actually bringing all of these things together and kind of running the ship in some sense without having the direct authority. So if it fails, it's essentially on the PM. Just some quick tips in terms of how to like prep if you want to be a PM. So with respect to some of the key things that we talked about were around product and strategic insights. So I would say to build these sort of a skill set, you should start by studying a lot of case studies in terms of how some of these products got to where they are. So let's say, how did Uber become Uber? So start with like the discovery phase in terms of how did they start? Like, how did they understand the customer problem? What was the minimum viable product they built? What were the metrics that they were looking at, and so on. And just be curious about all the products around you. So if you see an HP laptop, like, oh, why is the keypad this way? Or why are the why are the keys designed in a certain way? So just be curious about a lot of products around you. I think communication skills is by far one of the most important things you need as a PM. You'll have to negotiate all the time with your engineering team, with the cross-functional team to get resources, to get things prioritized, to tell people why something needs to be built, or more importantly, why something should be dropped. If the feature is somebody's baby, it's very hard to convince people to basically figure out that we should not be doing it. Understand different types of PM roles. I think this is important. So there are different types of companies, or rather, you can look at it in different angles. So there's a B2C PM, which would be, let's say, PM of Instagram or YouTube. B2B PMs would be, let's say, PMs for AWS or GCP. Similarly, across hardware, software, front-end PMs, back-end technology PMs, and so on. So the skill sets required for these may slightly be different. As a back-end PM, you would have to have very heavy knowledge of software engineering stack, versus a front-end PM, you'll be more around like growth and metrics and like front-end components. And the last, I think, is doing the interviews well is super important. The PM interviews are very, very different from what a typical SWE interview looks like. They usually focus on case studies in terms of if you have to build a product, let's say if you have to build a refrigerator or an alarm clock for a blind person, how would you essentially do it? So the common themes there that they would be looking at is, do you have the product, the necessary product and strategic insights? Can you think about the problem analytically with metrics at hand? Is it a creative solution or not? Can you communicate these things effectively? So these are sort of the main criteria that are usually judged in a PM interview. So preparing for that is going to be like super important. So yeah, cool. And just yeah, I think just if there was one takeaway from these particular slide is, if you want to get into the PM role, after analyzing the pros and cons, you decide that this is the right field for me. Then one of the most important things you can do is like think like a PM to get into that mindset. So if you're looking at a laptop, or if you're looking at a phone or a particular app, always think about what would I do if I were the PM of the product. So that makes you think about something very critically, that, hey, yeah, the sign up flow actually was not good because of XYZ reason. So if I were the PM, I would actually change things in a certain way. So always be kind of curious and figure out, if you were the PM of the product, what would you do? And there is no better way to kind of get into the PM mindset than that. Cool. And last thing, which is, I just wanted to share my journey to product management. So I did my BTech in computer science. So my journey has been a little bit of test it out and see if you like it kind of a situation. So I did my computer science. After that, I did a few software engineering internships. During the internships, I kind of felt that, hey, yeah, development is super cool, but I probably do not have the patience to sit around and like debug things on Stack Overflow, for example. So I decided I wanted to try something else after school, after college. So I started off as a management consultant, which was totally separate from technology. I was doing like financial consulting in some sense. While doing that, I realized probably this is too far away from technology. So I came back into the technology world. I worked for, like, I tried starting up my own company in a technology domain, and then worked for a startup for a bit as a data analyst. And then I ended up in Google as a data analyst come data scientist. So this was interesting. I was doing a lot of like ML modeling, like doing data analysis to figure out how to churn data to figure out user insights and so on. And then when I did that for a few years, I realized that probably my skill sets are more aligned to the PM world. Because like I like talking to people. I think I like to think I have good communication skills, negotiation skills. I like to be at the front and center of problem solving. So basically, a lot of the things that I saw in a PM role were really aligned to what I wanted to do, and I was good at. So that was the reason why I actually decided to jump at product management. However, I know a lot of people who did not like it and jumped back to their previous roles. So software engineers who started as a PM and then moved back into software engineering, data analysts who tried out product management and went back into like data scientist world. So it's not everybody's cup of tea. I know it sounds like product management sounds cooler these days, but I would like totally say that figure out whether you really want to do it and you are potentially good at some of these things. And if you think that is the case, then kind of try upskilling yourself and getting into that field. So I think this is probably the last slide I have. That is correct. So I'll just pause here and for if there are any questions. I know I ran a little bit over time, but I think we still have a few minutes for Q&A.
Great, awesome. Thanks for this wonderful talk. So you can now turn off your share screen.
Sure.
So we have some questions, so I'll ask them one by one. And let's see what it is. Niranjan asks, I am in the investment field but wish to make a switch to tech sector. PM role seems something I could do. Do you think this is a feasible idea?
What sector is he in? He said
investment field.
I see. Okay. So yeah, I mean, these days the product management role is being seen as the transition role from a lot of other areas. So, for example, a lot of consultants are actually getting into product management as well. Definitely, a lot of co-founders, when companies get acquired, are actually joining in as product managers, unless they are like super tech heavy and they are interested in the engineering field. So, I would say this could be a good segue from that particular field. That said, PM is not just the only area that they could focus on. So, for example, there are a lot of roles in marketing, sales, legal. I don't know if they have a legal background, for example. So, project management is another one, which is like getting like technical project management is getting a lot of sites this in the tech industry overall. So I would say yes, the PM is one path, but do think about what you are interested in, what your skill sets are, and then like also evaluate some of these other options before finalizing on product management.
Great. Another question we have: product management for new graduates. Is it a good idea? And yes, this similar question was asked by someone who wanted to select between going into software engineering versus product management at the start of their career.
Yeah, so I think this is a really good question. So I think there are opportunities to go into product management right after school. One of the things that is good or bad about product management is that there is no formal education. So you can be a software engineer and you can get into a company as a software engineer, but none of these schools essentially teach you product management for like 2 to 3 years, right? It's kind of something that so the skill set is something that I feel you can build over time. Getting right out of college, I think the advantages are that you usually a lot of these companies put you on a learning trajectory. So you'll have these like rotation programs in some sense where you're doing 6 months with one team, 6 months with other team. At least some of the larger companies do that. So you get that exposure to things right out of college. And yeah, the kind of there is no unlearning that needs to be done. For example, if somebody is moving from a different domain, they have to kind of unlearn certain things to get into the hat of product management. So right out of college, I think this is an exciting opportunity if somebody can get it. But again, however, my answer goes back to it depends. Like if you are really passionate about coding, and if you think you are really good at it, I would say give a crack at software engineering roles, because maybe that is something that you would really like. But if you are interested in understanding the larger strategic picture and solving the problem at like by working closely with the customer, I think the PM role may be for you. So short answer is yes, there is an opportunity to go into PM roles after school. However, it might be slightly limited because people usually want like experienced PMs in some sense. But that said, however, the most important thing should be based on the challenges and the positives I talked about. Like figure out what really drives you, and based on that, take a call.
How is the difference between salary and benefits?
So between software engineers and product managers, I don't think there is a significant difference in salaries and benefits. Product managers are typically seen as part of the tech organization itself. So I don't, from what I know, there isn't any like significant difference between salaries of PMs or SWEs.
Is there any impact do you see because of COVID-19, specifically in product management roles? Or let's talk about Google.
So with respect to product managers, so one of the key things PMs do is like work with a lot of cross-functional teams, right? So it is a lot about building relations at times, and relationship building on video conferencing can be challenging, as you can imagine. There are no water cooler talks. The conversations are usually very transactional. So I think that has been like one of the biggest things that's been impacted. That said, however, in my role, at least, I can work effectively over GVCs as well. It's just that the relationship aspect kind of takes a hit a little bit.
Got it. Okay. One last quick question. Would you like to share your thought on the theme of the conference, which is pursuit of mastery? And with that question, can you also share one of your favorite book?
One of my favorite books. Wow, that's a good question. Pursuit of Mastery. I think I'm super huge on continuous learning. I think I read in one of the books just yesterday that a formal education will get you a job, but whatever you study after that will a formal education will get you a living, but informal education that you do will actually get you a fortune. So it's essentially what you do after you have gained formal education, which really counts in some sense. And I'm really big on learning. One of my favorite books, yeah, I would have to say Switch by Dan and Chip Heath is probably one of my recent favorites. It's a book about how to bring about change in any organization or any like personal or professional life. It essentially talks about if you have to change something, how do you essentially go about making that change?
Great. We are exactly on the right time. We need to close this now. And thanks a lot for joining and sharing this knowledge. This is really wonderful. And this is the second time you are joining on Git Commit Show. Lovely to see you again. Hopefully next year also.
All right. Sounds good. Always great being here. Thanks a lot, Pradeep. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.